MVC architecture. I'm Christina Plochet, and I'm presenting for our group, which also includes J.O. and Tanner Plum. MVC stands for Model View Controller. And in our presentation today, we're going to compare the Model View Controller architecture to ordering food at a restaurant to help you get an idea of how this all works together. So I really love this diagram, and we're going to compare it to the restaurant analogy. So in that analogy, the view, it would be the restaurant, so over here. And then the controller would be your waiter that you order food from. And then the model would be like the cooks in the kitchen, and the database would be the pantry. So, they go get the food, come back, make it happen, give it back to the waiter who brings it back to you. And in that process, the waiter is also talking with the restaurant management about things, and that would be like the client. We're not going to talk about the client or the database much. We're just going to focus on model view controller, but this analogy is really helpful for understanding what's happening. So, as we said, MVC stands for model, view, and controller, and the model handles the data and the business logic of the application. The view handles the user interface, and then the controller handles the user request from the view to the model and the data from the model to the view. So in our analogy, the model would be like, imagine like the cook, like the food is the main reason you go to a restaurant, right? Like you want to eat good food, and all that action happens in the kitchen. That's our model. But even if that restaurant has really good food, you also want to have a good experience. So like the appearance of the restaurant, the comfort of the booth, and having a functional menu greatly enhance that experience and all really important parts of it. And that is your user interface. So then you also, as a customer, you don't communicate directly with the kitchen. That would be chaos. You communicate directly with your server, your waiter. And then they go tell the kitchen what you want, and the kitchen prepares it, and then they bring it back to you. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into each one of these. So we're going to start with our model, which handles the data and the business logic. And you can see, the picture of our cook in the kitchen here. So making things happen. In software, he'd be doing that with data, but in the kitchen, he's doing it with food. But hopefully that helps. And so the model can be somewhat hard to understand, but it is the implementation of the software central structure. So this is the main functionality of the application, and they're the part that actually does the work. They hold on to data, and they deal with that, and they're also independent from the other parts of the application and they don't require the controller or the view to work, but they are all connected and do communicate with each other. So in our hack project, the examples would be assignments, events, and tasks. So each of these models contain a subset of data which helps the model to perform. For example, an assignment would have things such as due dates and descriptions, and each of these would be their own classes that hold their own information, even if that information is relatively the same among them. The alternative would be a single model that could be called, say, a task. Then each of those would be like a subtask. One would be an assignment, one would be an event, etc. Coding-wise, the best way to remember a model is that it would be the actual class rather than a variable or a function. So the view, that's our restaurant here. See the lovely chairs and table. This is our user interface. So this is what the user is going to interact with. It represents all the information that users need to see, such as a chart or a diagram, and it renders the model into a form that's suitable for interaction by the user. And because the view layer is for just the user interface, it contains client-side technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's good for designers or any other front-end developers because they don't have to worry about the model or the controller layer. And then in our hack project, everything that the BYU Idaho students see in the hack application would be the calendar view, the dashboard view, the detail view, and the list view. So next, let's talk about the controller. So the controller is represented here by our lovely waiter who's looking like he's bringing me something yummy. And so the controller handles the user requests from the view to the model. So I'm sitting in the restaurant, I'm going to tell the waiter, hey, this is what I would like to eat. And he's going to go take my order, bring it back to the kitchen, right? And then all that action happens in the kitchen behind the scenes. I see none of it, and it's going to happen quickly, I'm sure, because it's going to have excellent performance. And optimization, and then the waiter is going to bring the food back to me. So he's going to handle that data that came from the model or the kitchen back to the view. So back to me, back to the user interface. Let's talk about this as though I was logging into a website. So in the view, um, I enter my username and my password, and the controller is going to take that information and validate it, make sure that I'm not like trying to drop tables or something. And then it's going to save that as a variable that it's going to send to the model. The model is going to take that, look at the database, like, does this person exist? Does the password match? Yes, it does. Great. Send it back to the controller. And then the controller is going to let me move on to the the next screen, right? My dashboard or whatever. And then in that process, the controller, unbeknownst to me, is also going to send some information to the client or the browser, like save that data in the session that says, hey, this is Christina, and here's her information. So next time we need to use that, it's saved. So let's talk about what this would look like in our hack program. So let's, for example, say that, imagine that we check a box to indicate that a task is complete. In that case, the controller would identify what assignment was marked as complete and relay that information back to the model. Then the model would perform some action on that data, like saving it to the database, and then send it back to the controller, who would send it back to the view to indicate that the information had been saved. There are some advantages and disadvantages to working with MVC architecture. Not every website uses this, nor necessarily should they. It's not suitable for like small size projects. And I'll say also, just because I work for WordPress, like WordPress doesn't use MVC architecture. It probably would be good if they did, but they don't. And that's a big application that doesn't. But we're going to use it. I like it. It's organized and great. So here's some reasons why it's used. So first of all, the model, the view, and the controller are developed separately, and it provides a clean separation of concerns among the presentation layer, the model, and business logic, and that makes it a lot easier to maintain and edit the code, which that's super important because you've got functions in one place and variables in another place, and HTML in another place, and rather than all mixed together. So that makes it a lot easier to maintain and edit to find things. Also, multiple developers can work simultaneously on each one of the layers. So you can have your front-end developers working on the view layer, and you can have your other developers working on the model and the control, and like the database people, they can do the parts like that are all your SQL queries, like in the model or whatever. So so those are huge, and then also organizationally, it enables like logical grouping of related actions in the controller together. So you can just group related actions together, which is really helpful. And then the views for a specific model are also grouped together, and it improves reusability of the model and the view. So we can have multiple views which can point to the same model and vice versa. So you can reuse things like variables, since they're saved in the controller, they can be used like in multiple like models or functions. And that's really helpful rather than having to save everything separately every time and redo it. So let's review. So imagine you go into a Taco Bell to order lunch, and once you place the order, you wait for it to be completed. So who would the model be in this scenario? The server who took your order, the cook who prepared it, or the cashier who took your money? Well, think about it for a second, but I will tell you it would be the cook. They're the ones who prepared the food and did all the action there. So later that day, you decide to go to a restaurant with your significant other, and after you're seated and have looked through the menu, you place your order with the waiter. If we compare the waiter to the MVC architecture, then the waiter would represent the controller. And then the view would be like the restaurant, or in other words, the user interface. So I hope that helps to remember what we talked about today. And we have some references here. Wikipedia, SitePoint, the Mozilla Developer Network, and then there's actually a great video on YouTube and Medium, and I'm adding the link to our slide presentation here so you can get these links if you want. And thanks for watching. This has been great.